Hi, cannabis industry friends. Welcome to the High Ground Podcast, a bi-weekly series that takes an in-depth look at the product trends we're seeing in the California cannabis market. I'm your host, Jocelyn Sheltraw with Headset Analytics. And in each episode, we're going to be talking with brand leaders and innovators about the trends they're seeing on the ground in their respective product category. This season, we'll be covering 9 main categories: beverages, capsules, concentrates, edibles, flower, pre-rolls, tinctures, topicals, and vapor pens. And more than just market data, the mission of High Ground is to get an unfiltered and authentic look at how the people behind the brands are navigating the ups and downs of the California market. We'll be running the gamut from bootstrapped legacy brands that survived the transition from Prop 215 to Prop 64 to newer entrants who are well capitalized and holding the top seat in their category. So today, we're going to be kicking off the season with beverages, and we're going to be talking to a friend of mine, Alexi Chialtas, the co-founder and CEO of Wunder. Now, Alexi and his 2 co-founders, Christian Peterson and Phil McGarr, are based in the Bay Area, and they launched Wunder in the fall of 2020 as a low-dose, all-natural cannabis beverage that's really designed to be a social and mindful alternative to alcohol. Now, Alexi is a personal friend whom I deeply respect, and I particularly appreciate his conscious approach to cultural transformation in the cannabis consumption. So I'm excited to kick off the season with him as our guest. And so before we get started, let's talk about some of the high-level trends that we're seeing in the beverage category. This is really going to help frame the discussion for our listeners. This is going to give you a sense of what role beverages play within the California cannabis market as a whole. So the data that I'm going to be talking about right now and through the episode, this data is going to be all sourced from Headset. Headset is a cannabis data and analytics company that pulls data directly from the point of sale systems at brick and mortar dispensaries and delivery companies. And Headset then forecasts all of those sales up for the entire market all in real time. So some of the key category trends that we've been seeing at Headset and looking at cannabis sales in California just in 2021, in 2021, adult use cannabis sales, they exceeded $5 billion. This is a big, big business. And the beverage category is really exciting to watch. This category is growing, though currently the beverage category out of all cannabis categories in California is making up about 1.2% of the total retail sales in the market. And this was just over $64 billion in revenue. $million in total revenue, which was about 50% growth over 2020. So a growing category, something that's really exciting to watch. Certainly a newer category, right? People are becoming much more familiar with beverages. It's not like flower or pre-rolls where people understand, how to consume those. So we'll be following this category closely. And now the category, it's ranking 8 out of the 10 categories that we track at Headset in terms of revenue contribution to the total space. Flower, probably not surprisingly, this ranks number 1. It had almost $2.2 billion in sales in 2021, just to put into perspective that total number of 5 billion sales. And the top 3 brands in the beverage category are Can, Hi-Fi Hops, Lagunitas, and Keef Cola. So combined, all of those 3 brands are actually making up 40% of the total category sales in beverages. So without further ado, I am pleased to welcome Alexi to today's show. Alexi, thank you so much for joining us today. Really excited to learn from you and hear more about your story and why you started Wunder. And so before we jump into all of the data, let's just start with that. Tell us a little bit more about your personal story. What is your background? What brought you into cannabis? And really, what are some of your guiding principles that navigate you through your cannabis journey?
Yeah, sure. First, I'm excited to be here. Happy to be chatting with you. Really excited to dive in here. I think chronologically is probably the best place to start. And so I was born and raised in LA, in the suburbs of LA particularly. And spent my early years there until I moved up to Northern California to attend Berkeley, the undergraduate program there. And it was at Berkeley that I had my first exposure to, I think, 3 of the big factors and that are such a big part of my life today, or at least in driving of where I am today. And particularly those factors being, I think, alcohol, Cannabis, and then meeting my co-founder Christian. So we became dear friends starting in the early days at Berkeley. And my first exposure to those were really at that time period. And when I think about it, I probably chalk it up to the fact that my parents, having come from having two parents of their own, each having parents of their own that were kind of really heavy into drinking and seeing kind of the effects of alcoholism, coming from immigrant families, just really not interested in that. My parents really never saw my parents really drinking or exposed to that or cannabis. And, as my mom as an immigrant, she immigrated to the United States at the age of 18 by herself from Paraguay, became a teacher. And it's just, those types of things were not really, in that age, something that I had a lot of exposure to. And so dropped me in Berkeley, which is ironic as it is, and then dropped me into an international dorm where I lived and also worked. And it wasn't long before I had met, European friends and found myself in a social circle, smoking a spliff. And, whether that was before dinner, Friday night, after dinner, after a long night out, it became a routine where we would do that and we would smoke and we would talk about, the happenings of that week or just really ask and have kind of deep and meaningful conversations with each other. And so I think those were the seeds and really powerful seeds that really showed me the power of bringing different people from different cultures together to socialize and to really connect with each other through cannabis. And so after Berkeley, a couple of years later, I found myself at Zynga, which was a consumer tech company in the early years coming out of the financial crisis. So this was in 2009 that I joined Zynga, around employee 300, and we went to 3,000 in 3 years. So I was there for almost 7 years, and I saw kind of this meteoric rise as we scaled quickly, really built a new category in social games on different platforms, and went public. And frankly, I think went public too early. Didn't really have everything figured out, and became a turnaround situation kind of quickly thereafter. So what I think would be probably a 10-year turnaround, I was there for 4 years of it. And so during my time there, though, what I think is interesting is that I fully embraced, I think, the duality of what I talk about is the duality of alcohol, which is how alcohol is there for every celebratory moment that we have as a culture. And it was there for Zynga. We had many of the celebratory moments, from IPO day where we showed up at 4 a.m. and, celebrated until the sun came up. And on the other side of it, though, as we became a turnaround, I ran some pretty sizable teams, a 200-person team from 2012 to 2014. And when we were restructuring, I had, some really stressful moments for me personally, but also for the company and for the people that I worked alongside. Calling 30 or 40 people into a room on a Thursday and telling them that they don't have a job anymore is just really a traumatic experience. And I think I carried a lot of that pressure and a lot of that weight. And I also used and embraced alcohol as a coping mechanism for people that I worked with on my teams. So I had a scotch collection on my desk. If we had a rough week, you could come by, we could grab a glass of scotch or, a drink and really just like kind of chat it out and use that as a decompressing element. And so it wasn't until after 7 years where I was pretty burned out, I took a step back and really wanted to kind of invest in myself. And unexpectedly, I guess not surprising now, but I completely stopped drinking. And it's then that kind of the light bulb, moment kind of subtly happened where I realized how much the drinking was associated with kind of set and setting. So the mental stress and what I was going through, at a young age, at 28, 27, 28, 29 years old, with that kind of responsibility, but then also, really trying to lead people and use alcohol as a coping mechanism. And so, a couple years later, after deciding, ultimately that Christian and I, we were really excited about starting a company together. We were really excited about, teaming up and seeing if we could build something. And then we got really excited about the thesis of cannabis beverages as an alcohol alternative, and really just the alcohol alternative movement as a whole. In 2018, I think it was still very much the early stages, but it was pretty clear to me, through the different life cycles, whether you're talking about, a White Claw, which if you do the math is 8 times or a vodka soda, ounce for ounce is 8 times stronger than a White Claw. So this idea of less alcohol, of alcohol alternatives, of non-alcoholic, I think those things were happening, and it was really easy to kind of see that there would be an opportunity with cannabis beverages, and so and really just beverages in general. And so we got really excited about that. And from a principles perspective, I think there's 3 that I want to call out. The first is really that just life's too fucking short, and we work too much, and I think work's such a big part of, and always has been a big part of my life, because doing something passionate, the intellectual stimulation, and that finding a balance is obviously important, but coming back to life's too short, I think really recognizing how much control you have of deciding who you work with, and being surrounded by people that inspire you, push you, grow you. And so I think that's been something that was really the first principle that I had when I was thinking about what to do next after Zynga. And so, saying no to kind of, big tech or, other opportunities. I just, starting a company was exciting, and then really the opportunity within cannabis. The second, I think, is to do something really impactful and meaningful to you kind of personally, and really just recognizing, I think for me, that could be something that was not tech, was something that I had to grapple with personally of I've spent all this years developing this skill set, and kind of switching into something that, contextually was just very different was a big leap for me. But at the end of the day, felt really, excited by it, because I could see the purpose in what we were doing in creating a real alcohol alternative for people. And then the last one, having a growth mindset and hustle. So we talk about this as a team, in that really realizing that being right is one thing, but being right, understanding why you're right, and sharing those learnings to other people on the team really allows us to scale an individual to an organization. We're a relatively small team, so I think that each time we share that's really important. And I think as we kind of focus on how do we develop learnings as a startup, it's both the positive and the ones that didn't go so well that we want to share, because that's just an opportunity for everyone. And so kind of creating that space and trying to build that safeness, and from a culture perspective to embrace that. And then just the hustle piece, right? You have to have hustle as an entrepreneur. I think you have to have hustle in cannabis, where, things are going to be unexpected, and you just got to keep pushing forward, and you gotta just move quickly, and just have that mentality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. I'm so inspired by so much of what you said, and can absolutely relate. As you know, we've known each other for 5 years now. I was working at Rubicon Project while you were working at Zynga. And I also
during Fleet Week, right?
We met during Fleet Week, and we were drinking and partying and having a grand old time. And that really, as you're mentioning, it's that really was a part of the culture. I worked on the agency side, and every aspect of working in ad tech, as you mentioned, celebrating the good, celebrating the bad, alcohol really was there. And it's almost like you don't even think about it until, as you're mentioning, until you're kind of out of that. And so I do notice, in the cannabis industry, even through the pandemic, people are out and we're still meeting. I mean, this business is still running as much as it can be. And drinking is a part of that culture. But I do find that people in this industry are much more conscious about their alcohol intake. And for me personally, that's why I'm just so happy for what you're building, you and your team, because it really is giving people an opportunity to be in that social setting, but to not feel like an outsider in that. And it's not just that they're having some great tasting drink to be able to do that, but you want it to look nice. You want to be able to have a faux cocktail, for example, or something that resembles a beer. You don't want to be called out for that, for not drinking and not participating in that. And so I'm really curious to see how our society evolves as more of these drinks are becoming available. So kudos to you. I'm so happy for everything you're doing. Okay, so let's kind of talk about some of the trends now that we've been seeing, because beverages, this is a really exciting category to be building within cannabis. And so, over the last year, we've been seeing 50% growth. But when you look at the month-over-month sales, we've actually been seeing some declines since April of 2021. And so I'm just wondering, what are you personally seeing with your like brand on the ground? Are you seeing demand increasing? Are you seeing demand decreasing? And more generally, do you think consumers are warming up as to beverages being a newer form of cannabis consumption?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I think our entire framework for this whole journey and what we're accomplishing has really been about just recognizing how early we still are, and also just appreciating how much has really changed over the last 3 years. And so, I think it's interesting that you point out like, hey, what's been happening since April, as a whole. When I zoom out and if I look over a multi-year period, it kind of looks like we're at a level now. And, I would say, well, what's going to happen next? And how do we really unlock kind of the next level of growth as an industry and as a whole? Because what I've seen, in that it's so early, is that, I mean, first of all, we're still fairly early. Like we launched in Q4 of 2020. We had a great year. I think in Q4 this past year, we grew 700% quarter over quarter, year over year, 50% quarter over quarter. And, I think that is driven by really consumers, both new to cannabis, but then also within cannabis, developing, not just through our products, but through the slew of different products that are out there, of really developing an appreciation for what I call kind of this new age of beverages. And so, cannabis, I think we remind ourselves that cannabis beverages is not new to just non-cannabis consumers, but it's also very new to cannabis consumers. And anyone that was a cannabis consumer and really excited about cannabis beverages in 2018 got a very different flavor of brands, got a very different flavor of product, a very different flavor of experience, not to use flavor, but yeah. And so I think that first it's just like, I think a huge testament in terms of just, the growth that the industry has seen as a category, even though recognizing that it's still really early. And then on the demand side, we are seeing, basket sizes increase. We are seeing beverage consumers buy multiple brands within their basket. And we are seeing, for us in particular, that, getting people to try the category, getting people to try the product is really the first leg of the battle. And so, and the reactions that we're seeing have been pretty positive. It's been positive both from existing cannabis consumers and then that they think like, oh wow, I didn't expect this to taste like this, or wow, that did really feel good. And then obviously on the new to cannabis consumers, it's all new. So there's a lot of kind of giggles and questions and education that needs to happen there. So I don't expect it to kind of continue to increase in this straight line. But since we launched, our conviction has only increased, and that beverages will be the biggest category within cannabis. And I know that that's a fairly bold statement. I if I just, again, take a step back, right, and I look at smoking, right, as an analog. So, I think the numbers that I saw was like 6% of the U.S. adult population uses a vape. And I think it's 14% of people smoke cigarettes. And so you get to 20% of the U.S. population as a smokable format today, right? And obviously that's decreased. And so, I just think that anybody who is really going to be open to cannabis in the future, some of them will be interested to smoking in some of these other formats, but what was the number? I think it's 70% of adults have drank a beverage in the last year. So it's just mathematically, it's a more approachable format. It's what I think people are going to be more comfortable with. And, there needs to still be a lot of innovation. There still needs to be a lot of work to be done on the supply chain side, on the infrastructure side, on the education side. But I do, really believe that that's the future. And so when I look for what needs to happen, kind of going forward, I do really think it's about solving some of these big problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's such a great point. I would agree with that. We're not just from, seeing the growth of the beverage category, but we're very bullish on beverages. And when I really think about it's think about like going into a consumption lounge today, that's not really friendly for someone that isn't wanting to consume an inhalable, right? But yeah. I can imagine in 10 years from now, when we have bars to which people are able to drink a cannabis beverage alongside someone who chooses an alcoholic beverage, or being at things like Lollapalooza or Bottle Rock, so events, or all the tourism that's going to come with it, being able to travel to the farms, learn the process of how beverage, it's going to be very comparative to wine. So everything that we're seeing, the opportunities that exist within an alcoholic beverage or a liquor beverage, that's going to exist within cannabis. And so I agree with you. I think this is going to be ultimately the largest category because it is most inviting to people. It's more people are going to be able to enjoy this. And so, yeah, fully agree with you there.
Yeah, and I think just like building off of that really quickly, I feel like it's still very early, and the analog that I use is that, not to get tech or anything like that, but in 2012, I saw kind of people's reaction if you had a Tesla. And not that I had a Tesla, but I just saw how people reacted if you were somebody who had a Tesla, because it was so new. Everybody had questions. If you showed up somebody like, it was just a conversation piece at every social gathering. And I think that's what is happening, with cannabis, but in particular, like from my lens with cannabis beverages, is when that's in the cooler, when that's in, at the kid's birthday party, or when that's at the social event, it is a conversation piece. And there are questions, there's curiosity, and ultimately interest. And for me, I think that's really bullish on the long-term trend of beverages.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about the types of beverages that are out there, because there's a bunch of different types of beverages.
Yeah.
At Headset, we'll classify these as subcategories, right? So when it comes to, in 2021, for example, the top selling product types by a long shot is carbonated beverages. And this really isn't going to come as any surprise, as you were mentioning, the like either Truly example or, carbonated beverages, clearly very popular. And so I'm wondering, so within carbonated beverages making up 35% of the total beverage sales, then we have things like mixes, elixirs, syrups, drops, you name it. When it's coming to different types of beverages, it's being created right now. And Wunder currently ranks as one of the top 5 brands amongst all carbonated beverage. So some of those other brands would be Can, which, big one there, Keef Cola, Habit, Pabst, and Wunder. Right. So first, congratulations on that success and being one of those top 5 brands. But so can you talk about why did you decide to make a carbonated beverage? What was your strategy there? And then are you going to be innovating and creating other products outside of that?
Yeah. So, I think, it's hard to, like, from a filter perspective, when we were getting started, I think the first filter that we were looking for was, what's a mass market idea? And whether it's carbonated beverages or not, I think you could probably get to a mass market idea that was either one. But for us, I think that when we took a step back and looked at like what was happening in that moment, I think in 2010, 2015, I think you had the advent of LaCroix and kind of everything happening there. And, sparkling beverages is really, I think it's everything that was happening with sparkling beverages, for me was really, I'll call it like a revolt, or really like starting to say no to soda, right? And soda being really the biggest carbonated product of all, and really one of the biggest categories of all. And really people saying no and kind of switching the pendulum on the other side of saying like, well, actually, a lightly flavored water that's sparkling can still scratch the same itch, and it's significantly better for me, and not putting 40 grams of sugar into each drink.
Oh yeah, I used to drink 2 Diet Cokes a day, and when LaCroix came out, that was a game changer for me. I haven't had a soda, and I can't remember the last time, because all I drink is a sparkling water now.
Yeah, exactly. And then and so I think that was really exciting, and that was really the early stages. And so I guess where I'm going with this is that it was just really weird to think, why not a sparkling beverage? And so to say it was like this kind of huge calculated thing, I think it checked 2 boxes, which was mass market and sizable opportunity, and the second one was momentum and kind of going in the right direction and going forward. And so I think that as a format in terms of beverages and a single serve in particular, I think that really aligned with our vision for the future, which was reinforced by bringing people together in the early days of bringing and creating these Wunder hours, and where we brought strangers together in 2018, 2019, and we would create these cannabis beverages and kind of see what the social interaction was and see the magic that was happening. And so when we saw that, it really felt like we were getting a glimpse into the future. And so a single serve sparkling beverage really just made a lot of sense. And from there, I think it was figuring out the stepping stones and what needed to happen to get there. And in 2018, I think the first stepping stone that we felt needed to be there was to have scalable manufacturing. So on the manufacturing side, and that wasn't solved in 2018. And so that's why we didn't fully commit to beverages in 2018 in the cannabis space, because we didn't want to build our own manufacturing facility. And so Space Station came around and solved that. And so that was really great, and really what unlocked us being able to move forward. And they had the capability to do carbonated beverages. So I think when I think about the kind of like the roadmap and the decisions, I think we have to keep in mind focus. Like focus is a big principle of ours, and in really trying to be clear about like what's our number one goal, and are we as an organization aligned on that one goal. And when you have limited capital, and when you're in kind of the startup mode, I think it can be very deadly if you try to do too much. And so we've been very excited by the opportunity within kind of carbonated, the opportunity within a canned single serve. And so I think it'll be a little bit of time before we increase the scope and go from that. But we are always looking at, what changes. We're always kind of every 3 months, every 6 months, we're looking and saying like, okay, let's take a look around. Let's talk to consumers. Let's talk to retail partners. Let's look at industry data, and let's see if anything is changing. And we kind of have a list of things that we're looking to change. And when those things change, like, our goal is to be ready for that change, but to not try to bet on it too early. And so these other formats, I think that they're interesting. We keep our eye on them, but beverages in the single serve format and the liquid format is it's more than a mouthful, I think, for us right now.
Yeah. So one of those other considerations is, it's milligrams. So how much THC goes into a beverage. And one of the things that I'm finding really interesting, like if we think back to cannabis just a few years ago, it's like, and even now, really high dose beverages are a main driver in sales. And this is also for other cannabis related products, right? People are buying everything, are buying off THC level. And without going down a rabbit hole there, I mean, there's there's obviously some concerns with that, right? If you're drinking a 100 milligram beverage just in one single sitting, some people have the ability to do that because they have the tolerance to do that. But arguably most people do not. And so I'm just curious, I guess, on that, like looking at that, microdosing versus macrodosing. At Headset, one of the things that we're seeing is that the top selling dosage is 100 milligrams of THC per package. And some of those most popular products, so Uncle Arnie's, they do this iced tea lemonade. We've got Manzanita Naturals, their kiwi shots, and Keef mocktails. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we're seeing top selling doses in the 5 to 12 milligrams of THC per packaged unit. And some of those top selling products are Hi-Fi Hops, their sparkling water, and then their social tonics. And so this low dosage trend is particularly popular in the carbonated segment, which is where Wunder is positioned. And so I would just like to hear more of your thoughts on this. Like, what do you think that consumers are leaning toward when they're macrodosing versus microdosing? What are some of the use cases?
Yeah. I mean, I think in that it's super important, which I think anybody who's been working in the cannabis industry long enough kind of recognizes pretty quickly, which is that the biggest consumers and longest fans of cannabis have probably developed the highest tolerance. And, they probably spend the most money, they buy the most. And for that to continue to be a lifestyle choice, and for some people it's really a medicinal choice, but for that to continue to be a lifestyle choice for some, you have to have efficacy in the product that you're having. And so I think that it's not surprising to me to see that the highest milligram products are the ones that are moving the most in the existing kind of market, because of the snapshot today and the retail distribution footprint that we have today and everything. It's those people who frequent the most, they have the most tolerance. And so I think that's the first thing that I think you have to acknowledge, or that we've acknowledged in the space, and in deciding where we play and what categories are we going to be a part of. And for us, it's really about multiple drinks in an occasion, similar to alcohol. And so it's not, that's where I think beverages shine. If you're really looking for kind of efficacy and not that kind of social experience, not that liquid experience, then, you could do a pill. And, and consumers choose to do that, and that's a very effective way to do it. But I think for the thesis that we have is that somebody wants something in their hand and that they want to be sipping something. Mm-hmm. And so, that's going to have different limits for different people. And so there's going to be this interesting distribution of where people sit on their tolerance level. And I think that's an opportunity for, new brands or existing brands to service kind of either more people or people at different points in time. I think on the occasion piece, when I look at something like Uncle Arnie's relative to something like the kiwi shots, or even the Keef mocktails, right? Like Keef mocktails and kiwi shots to me are like two different occasions, and the Uncle Arnie's is one where it's like it's a single serve for somebody who has a high tolerance, who wants something to drink, and then that's their product. And so that's, I would say, from an occasion perspective, is probably more similar to our drinks, but for a very different consumer. And then I would say that on the other side, you have, I think, this use case or occasion of, do I want something that's ready to drink, or am I interested in like making my own? And so, in the beverage space, RTD is like, I have a can, I open the can and I drink it. Making something my own would be like, I buy, a handle of vodka and I make my own drinks or my own, kind of cocktails. And so I think that, so someone like Keef, I think with their mocktails or the kiwi shots, like I remember being in a dispensary and asking a consumer, like, how do you use those kiwi shots? And she told me she took those, she mixed it with a little bit of LaCroix, like a capful, and she was good. And so that was functional for her. It fit her occasion. She was probably doing that at home and whatnot. And so I think that there's a market for both of those products, and people focus on the milligrams. And I think milligrams is important, but equally important, I think what you're calling out here is that the occasion is important. And those are real different occasions for different moments in time. And for different
Absolutely.
Consumers. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, really, cannabis, there's not the one size fits all here. It's people have a different connection to the plant and the uses for it. And it really spans the gamut, right? I mean, this isn't oftentimes, when I feel like, especially when I'm talking about cannabis, it's from a very recreational standpoint. And that's more so because I'm speaking on data so much. Yeah. But the medicinal side, that is really something. And when these products are being sold in the dispensary, there are people using them for medicinal reasons. And so really understanding what's important to consumers in that aspect, I think is going to help drive more innovation within these product categories to create products for people looking to solve those specific ailments or whatever it may be. Yeah, it's a fascinating one to watch.
The way you would market that, and the way, like, your selling points and your messaging points in the store, what a bud tender would say, all of that is very different, whether it's a medicinal product or whether it's a recreational product. And I think brands are picking up on that for the most part, because I think you're seeing brands that have a different audience or have kind of more of a medicinal bend. And then you have a lot that are focused on the recreational aspect, and you kind of have all different flavors of that as well. And so it's been super exciting to see the evolution.
Oh yeah. Well, being as a brand, talking about that and talking about, who your product should resonate with and why you created this product, that's such an important part of the story. I've been in the industry for almost 4 years, and it's been interesting to see how few more brands are doing it today than ever, but how few brands are still not capitalizing on that opportunity to really tell that story, because it's not the one size fits all. I mean, and one of the things, like I have some of your products here, but one of the things that I love that you did, it's like celebrating like dry January and like talking to people about, you're talking about everything on this episode. You're talking about this potential alcohol replacement. You're talking about having a product that can help you still socialize in a social setting and feel comfortable. That's the type of, messaging, that's the type of communication of how and why someone would consume your product. And I think that's something for, any people that are listening to this that are from the brand side, like really consider that, really think about what your story is and the right way to go communicate that, because you have to communicate that not just to the consumer, but you have to go communicate that to the bud tender. Yeah. You have to go communicate that to your investors. And so really thinking about those different stories and how you would talk about yourself and your brand, it's critical right now.
Yeah. And I mean, I think I think that one of the things to keep in mind too is not only are you, competing for attention from everything in the store, but like you're competing for attention. Everyone in the world is competing for consumers' attention. So whether that's digital, whether that's every other category, and there's only a finite amount of time and attention that a consumer has. And so really, really thinking through when's the right moment to engage them, what's the piece that's going to resonate with them, and what's my one thing or two things that I want that is going to bring them in to my product and connect with them. I think it's tricky. It's tricky. We're still figuring it out, but it's very tricky.
Yeah, not easy for sure, but critical. Okay, so to close out, today's interview, I would just love to hear, obviously, so this podcast is all about California, right? We're talking to founders building categories all across California. And it's no secret that this is a very challenging market to be a part of right now. But I'm just wondering, so for 2022, 2023, how are you feeling about it? What are your predictions for any upcoming beverage trends? And then what's next for the team at Wunder?
Yeah, totally. Well, so I think the only thing I probably know for sure and can promise that's going to happen in 2022 and 2023 is that whatever I say here probably won't happen, or it'll be different from that. So, not able to tell the future yet, but when I get that, you'll be the first to know. But I think that, joking aside, the thing that we were talking about as a team recently is that I think it's really clear, and we're really excited by all of the new brands that are coming into the space, into the beverage space, because it's going to take a lot of players to really help the category grow. And we're seeing these brands, both big, small, both sides. And I think each one will have a different set of kind of challenges that they'll need to overcome to establish themselves in the market. But I think there's no doubt that they're coming. And so I think that that's a huge win for the industry. I think over the next 2 years, one pain point that was really real, I think in 2021, was constrained manufacturing. And I think that's very close to being solved, if not, well on its way. So you have, it was one thing to have scaled manufacturing, but a lot of people couldn't, and it was really expensive, and it was really hard and challenging to kind of learn how to do new products. And so I think that anybody who comes now is going to be able to leverage all of the infrastructure that's been developed, and it's not much, but there's some pieces of it that have been developed in ways that we couldn't. And I think that's exciting, and it's a big win, I think, for new players, because they'll need less capital, they'll need to make less mistakes, and they'll be able to kind of help build the category and focus on, I think, things that are more high value add, which is, consumer education and awareness and trial. And so I don't think manufacturing will be an issue, particularly in California in 2022 and 2023. I think the other thing that will need to happen, but is probably really unclear how it's going to happen, is that I think that both competition and really just the dynamics of kind of survival as a startup, but really the constraints that are in both the beverage industry and the cannabis industry, is I think that you're going to need to see, that we will see those two factors lead to innovation, a step function change in innovation in the beverage category. And so I think that when you have your back against the wall, it really forces you to think in new ways and creative ways and to try things that are different. And so that's something that we've been talking about as a team of how could we approach something differently? How could we not accept that things are the way that they are? And where do we think that there's opportunities for kind of like massively changing something structural within our business? And so yeah, and then I think, in terms of what's next for us, 2021 was really about establishing our footprint in California, which I think we did, and establishing a solid investor base and people who believed in our vision. So, people who believed in our vision, both on the investor side, because capital is important, but also people who believe in our vision from the consumer perspective. I think we've seen, heard, and tried to engage with our super fans. We love them. And they're a source of inspiration for me every day and for the team. And then in 2022, I think we're really teed up to do more of that. So we know we want to go into new states. We're planning to go into new states. We think that we can bring Wunder and really bring education into these new markets. And then I think to do that,
can you share a little bit about those markets, or to be determined?
To be determined. So, I think that there's a handful of markets that I think everybody would, from a dinner I was at recently, everyone's looking at the same set of markets, right? Like, there's the markets that are showing, real promise. Like you have Massachusetts, Illinois, Michigan, Colorado, Arizona, Nevada. And I think what it really comes down to is there's a different set of operational realities that will influence your decision to go into those markets. And so we're still in discovery on many of those markets and trying to figure out like what's what, and what sets us up to be the most successful and like what's going to be our strategy, right? Like our focus. And so we're very much trying to kind of finalize that now. But we know that once we get in there, we have a lot of learnings from California to start to take into those new markets. And so we're really excited about that. And I think there's been a lot of interest on the investor side of hey, when can we join your journey? And so we've been having those conversations of speaking to, capital partners, both on the kind of like traditional maybe venture side or cannabis side, but then also on the strategic side of talking to people who bring more than just capital, who understand either beverages, consumer, or cannabis, and can really help us, build the category at the national level and lead the movement in alcohol alternatives. So, that's we have a lot on our plate, but we're excited about California, and we're excited about kind of the new potential in 2022 and 2023.
Yeah. Well, if you can make it here, you can certainly, better chances making it anywhere. So excited for everything that you're doing and excited to follow your progress and kind of how this next year goes for you. So the next podcast, I'm going to be talking about capsules. So I'm just curious, do you use capsules at all, or?
So I do. I don't use them a lot, though. I don't know if tablets are the same as capsules. Are those the same? Yeah. So yeah. So I mean, Level was a huge inspiration for us. Phil, who was one of our original co-founders, he kind of showed them to us pretty quickly, and we got to meet Chris and Bree. And so, and then they were also playing on the cannabinoid side. So like they were definitely a source of inspiration for us of thinking about what would be possible from differentiated effects. And so, I do use the capsules, every once in a while. Maybe if I don't have time for a drink, but, drinks and, maybe recently trying to dabble in smoking, but not too much. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, I'm excited. That's cool. I can't wait to. Who are you? Do you know who you're interviewing? Can you tell me?
Not yet. Confirming between two different people. So stay tuned. That'll be out. We're going to do this every 2 weeks. So
awesome. Sweet. Yeah. That's exciting.
All right. Well, amazing. Thank you so much for your time. I just really appreciate your authenticity and just being so open with your learnings. And I think it's incredibly important for our industry to really have that, to be authentic, to come with a spirit of wanting to help each other. And you mentioned it here. You said, it's like we have to work together to grow this industry. And we don't even know what this industry is yet. And we are just being born. So having conversations like this and being able to learn from other people, this is, I believe, going to be an imperative factor in getting us to the next level of growth.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like on that note, right? Like if I'm really honest about me personally, right? Like I think we as a team were really surviving and kind of had our heads down in execution mode over the last 12 to 18 months. And I think we were discussing this also as a team of how do we start to kind of build community with other people who are interested in the space. And so I have kind of like my personal goals around that. But if anybody, who's listening to this and, interested in the beverage space, please reach out. I'd be happy to try to help, and really just connect and start to kind of create these moments, to maybe connect on a personal level and maybe an informal level. I know that there's formal organizations that are already, kind of working on this that Jeremy, who's one of our team members, is a part of, like the CBA. And so, I think there's lots of work that's happening. I'm excited about, kind of doing more. So
yeah,
I'm here.
That's a generous offer. And you know what, actually we should do, well, because as you know, I host a bunch of different events. And as you're saying this, I was thinking that we should do a cannabis beverage mixer on like the Guild yacht and take that around the Richmond Marina and have a really nice, just enjoying each other's company and trying a bunch of different beverages and just really bringing the community together. So
sold.
To be continued.
Let's
plan that.
I'm there. Can't wait. Okay. Save the date. All right.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Alexi. Appreciate you.
Love you.
Have a good day.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. The High Ground podcast is produced in partnership with TRICHOMES.com. Special thanks to the TRICHOMES production team, our executive producer, Claudio Miranda, and to all our incredible guests who make this show possible. My name is Jocelyn Chialtas, your host, and I look forward to joining you all in the next episode.